One of the issues that can be confusing for people who are exiting Mormonism is the whole question of priesthood, because most churches don't really look at priesthood or think about priesthood the same way that Mormonism does. So we're going to explore that together a little bit. And so first of all, why don't we just talk about how the LDS Church teaches about priesthood, or priesthood authority. Let's just review that really quickly and review briefly some of the problems with that.
Very good, yeah. As you probably know, the basic claim of the LDS Church is that they have the exclusive right or authority to act in God's name. That's the common thing that's said by the LDS Church. And along with that idea is that this priesthood authority is necessary to conduct all the ceremonies and ordinances of the LDS Church, for example, baptism and the temple ordinances that all pertain to salvation. And then the other part that's important to remember, of course, as we talk about this, is that the LDS Church teaches that they restored the priesthood, that it was restored to them through Joseph Smith and his cohorts that were with him at the time, his helpers at the time.
Yeah.
And so we need to ask ourselves, well, are there any problems with that concept? Are there weaknesses? Are there glaring failings or whatever? We should ask ourselves those questions. And we look, first of all, to LDS writings. And we do see some major problems. The first thing we find as we look at LDS history writings is that Joseph Smith and Oliver Cowdery were there and they claimed to have received the priesthood through John the Baptist and Peter, James, and John. But it wasn't until 5 years later that any kind of account of those visitations by those ancient early people was even written. So we have to ask ourselves, if the concept of LDS priesthood is so important to have God's authority as taught in the LDS Church, why did it take so long to have anything written?
Right.
It's a kind of a question. Richard Bushman, who's a well-known Mormon author, even posited the idea that perhaps it's possible that such things could lead to uncertainty about that situation. And the other, another point, Ross, that I'd like to bring out is that regarding the Melchizedek priesthood, the higher priesthood, 185 approximately years later, nobody inside the LDS Church or out knows when this happened. There's no date, no time. It's very vague. So we really have to ask that same question. If LDS authority in the priesthood is so important, which the LDS Church teaches quite heavily, why do we not have any kind of explanation or writing of when this took place?
Yeah.
So there are some other problems that occur too, and one of them occurs with LDS Scripture. The Book of Commandments preceded the Doctrine and Covenants, and in between those two books, the Book of Commandments and the first edition of the Doctrine and Covenants, there were changes made. And that's where we see the idea of the priesthood. But this is, again, all years later, 5 years or whatever after the fact, which all this leads us to ask the question, why the ambiguity, why the uncertainty if it's so important? And we need to be thinking about that as former LDS people. What is going on here?
Right, that's a good framework to help us think about, because the priesthood, when we were members of the church, was just everything. It was so important. It was the fabric of our whole daily experience, really, with priesthood blessing and prayer and so forth. So let's ask the next really question that springs from that is really, what does the Bible say? Does the Bible speak to that question of priesthood authority?
Well, that's a very good question, and the Bible, of course, is full of information on that subject. I think one of the things that we need to keep in mind is, as the Bible's teaching is so different than the LDS concept, and I like to look at it from a historical point of view sometimes, and one of the things that we see is that the Bible really gives us no reason to have even a restoration of the priesthood. The Bible gives no hint of any kind of restoration ever being needed. And when Jesus was ascending back to heaven in the last few verses of Matthew, he said that he would be with his followers until the end of the world.
Right.
And
Right.
the world hasn't ended yet, and he made that promise. If we believe Jesus, we would have to say that that church would be, the church that Jesus founded has been in operation ever since.
Right.
So that's one of the major points that we find. The other thing is that the Apostle Paul later, having been converted on the road to Damascus, when he taught and went out to the Gentiles, he taught a very similar teaching. He said, and it's found in 1 Corinthians chapter 11, that the church should continue to do the Lord's Supper until the end of the world.
Okay, right. Mm-hmm.
And if he gave us the command to have communion or the Lord's Supper till the end, then there must have necessarily been Christians for these past almost 2,000 years.
Yes.
And we see in history that is what happened.
That is the case, right.
So we do see that the Bible really is quite different. And as we come out of the Mormon church and we start thinking about that, it is kind of difficult sometimes to make this intellectual or emotional, spiritual transition.
Right.
But we have plenty of support in the Bible for the way that the Christian church has viewed authority and the issues that relate to this for some 2,000 years now. The other point that I'd like to point out is that because it's based on an LDS scripture, when I was on my LDS mission, we like to quote the fact that the church was built on the foundation of the apostles and prophets, and that Jesus was the cornerstone. Well, Jesus is still alive, so the cornerstone
Right.
has not
That's a good
gone
point.
away.
Great point.
And we do have the prophets, the Old Testament, we have those writings, and we have the apostles' writings in the New Testament. So we do have the foundation.
Right.
It has not gone away. And so we have Jesus promising to keep the church. We have the foundation still here. There is no need for any kind of a restoration. So as we come out of Mormonism, it's good to remind ourselves, you know what, the Bible has got the story and got the truth, and we can move on from some of those things that we were taught.
Great. That is so helpful. We're going to do another video on the subject of priesthood. But for today, I hope this helps you to understand as you're on your journey that really the idea of priesthood in the Bible is very different from priesthood in Mormonism. The priesthood claims that the Mormon Church has made that many of us bought into. There's problems with those claims. And we're going to explore in another video just what that looks like and how priesthood, the biblical kind of priesthood, really functions in the Church of Jesus that he established and how that functions today. So thanks for watching. God bless you. Take care.